One thing, Tanya, that I will always remember about you is how terrified you were of my cat.
The thing I always remember about Tanya is her amazing chocolate chip pancakes that she would always make whenever I slept over with Corinne. They were the best.
I will always remember about Tanya is her love for the beach. One time we were in New Jersey at one of her favorite beaches and it had rained 2 days straight. And she was so disappointed she couldn't go out to the beach. On our third and last day, she peeked into my room at 6 a.m. and said, "Lynette, it's gonna be a sunny day. Let's go." And I said, "Tanya, it's like 6 in the morning and it's dark outside." And she said, "Oh, well, I'll be waiting." I just loved her enthusiasm.
One thing we'll always remember about Tanya is our annual trips to the beach. We would go every summer and we always had a great time.
It was pretty amazing, except a lot of times it rained, but that was okay.
And one year there was an earthquake.
Yes.
While we were on the beach. And there were some other parallel parking
Yes.
things and such, but we're not supposed to talk
We
about
probably
that.
shouldn't tell any more stories.
Okay.
One thing I'll always remember about Miss P is how we read all the Diary of a Wimpy Kid books together. I also liked how she found humors in my stories about Jackson and about my weekends.
One thing that I will always remember about Tanya was how happy and positive she was. She was always laughing or smiling, and her laughter was contagious. As soon as she would start laughing, the whole family would start laughing with her.
The thing I'll always remember about Tanya is her charisma. The way she just lit up the room when she walked in, and just her amazing ability to put a smile not only on my face, but everyone else's as well.
The best thing about Tanya is her constant laughter. Our giggles and belly laughs and crying just because we were laughing about absolutely nothing at times. And also her great stories about living on a farm, which I still can't even picture in my mind. Those are the best things I remember about Tanya.
One thing I will always remember about Tanya is when I was a freshman in high school, she and Greg were our youth leaders, and any time that we would go to an event, or especially this one time up to the mountains for a retreat, DC Talk had just come out with their Free at Last album, and Tanya and I memorized every single word to every single song on this album, and we would sing it everywhere we went. And I remember sitting in the back seat of the white Dodge Neon, and she was in the front passenger seat, and we would just sing all the words so loud, and we were convinced that DC Talk needed to hire us as their background singers, which never happened, but it's their loss. But it was just so fun, and we drove Greg absolutely crazy. But also another thing that I just really loved about her was her laugh. If you heard Tanya laughing, you couldn't help but join in, and it was just something I really enjoyed those years with her in youth group.
Another thing, Tanya, that I will always remember about you is that you were such a girl mom and I was such a boy mom, and the differences that we experienced in raising our kids and the stories that we would share and laugh about. The one story that comes to my mind that made it so obvious that you were always around girls was when my boys were heading out to go night fishing. We were up in Maine and they were going to go out and fish after dark, and you were very concerned about how the fish would see the bait, and aren't they sleeping at night? And my boys responded, well, we use lightning bugs for bait at night.
One thing that I will always remember about Tanya is how she has been my cheerleader. Anytime I would text her with good news or tell her that I had good news, she would be right there doing her happy dance right along with me. And if I was going through something tough, she was always there with a hug. She's just such a sweet, compassionate person, and I love her so much for that.
I remember about Tanya. We had so much fun laughing together and cheering our girls on in their sport. Tanya was always so supportive, and she just was there for our entire family through some ups and downs, and she was always there with a nice smile and a nice hug.
So the one thing that I will always remember about Tanya was her loyalty to her friends and her family. She always had my back. She always let me know she had my back and she was in my corner. And it wasn't like just your regular old loyalty. She was fiercely loyal. Fiercely. like sometimes terrifyingly, fiercely loyal.
One thing, Tanya, that I will always remember about you is how loyal of a friend you are to me. You always had my back.
One thing I'll always remember about Tanya is her compassionate heart and her kind and sweet nature. Tanya, you've just always had this heart for people. So, you know, I love the warmth, you know, when you're standing at the front door at church greeting everybody, or even, you know, when I would sit down and talk with you, it's like you would sit and, you know, I would really have your heart and your full attention. And I love that heart to help other people. You've just been such a blessing in my life, and I'm just so very grateful for you.
One thing I'll always remember about Tanya is her selflessness. She demonstrated that twice on my wedding day. First, she didn't want to tell anybody that she was pregnant because she didn't want to take away from my special day. But also when we were outside taking pictures, I found out later in the day that she thought that she might be miscarrying because her stomach, she was having a lot of pain in her stomach, and here a bee had gotten inside her dress and had stung her multiple times, but she didn't say anything until we went inside the church, and I was just so shocked that she didn't say anything to anybody. But again, that's just her putting others in front of herself.
One thing I cherish about Tanya is how she supported my son Lincoln as his one-on-one aide from kindergarten to 8th grade. She did it with grace, humor, and tough love, not only academically, but emotionally and socially as well. I called her his second mom for that reason, and she is the rock star of the village that helped raise Lincoln.
Remember about Tanya is her sincere interest in what's going on in your life. She always made a point of asking what was going on in mine. I always looked forward to our lunch dates together since our birthdays were close together. We always had a good time catching up, and of course we laughed a lot. Love you, Tanya.
One thing that I will always remember about Tanya would be our weekly coffee dates. We would get together each week and just catch up. We'd talk about her cancer journey, where she was at with that, celebrate the great things and cry about the tough things. And without fail, she would eventually always say, enough about me and all this cancer stuff. How are you doing? What can I pray for you about? How are the kids? How's Tim? And just was always such a constant source of encouragement and friendship for me. And I'm going to miss her so much.
One thing I will always remember about Tanya is how selfless she was. I would ask her about her life and how it was new, and she would always turn the conversation around, especially in this difficult time. She wanted to know how we were doing, and I just thought that was simply amazing that she wasn't consumed with what was going on in her life. She never wanted cancer to define her, and it never did.
One thing I'll always remember about Tanya is how caring she was. When she was my small group leader when I was younger, she was always super ready to listen and pray for us.
One thing I will remember about Tanya is her genuine care for others. My husband and I were connected with Greg and Tanya by a mutual friend who knew that we were walking through a decision in our lives that Greg and Tanya had walked through earlier in their marriage. And that conversation that we had with them has just had a lasting impact on our lives. Despite the fact that we were almost strangers, Tanya was vulnerable and open with us in sharing her story. She listened to our hearts and encouraged us in our walk with the Lord. Greg and Tanya have continued to reach out to us. They've walked with us and prayed for us. Even through all that's been going on in their lives the past couple of months. Tanya has truly been an example of Christ's love to us.
One thing that I'll always remember about Tanya is she was always smiling and always so kind and warm to everyone that she met.
I'll always remember her laugh. I'll always remember how she supported Liana and Luke and I in whatever activities we were in.
I'll always remember her encouragement and how she just jumped in and embraced our family, and just we had so many great times together.
I'll always remember watching March Madness with her.
One thing I will always remember about Tanya is her strength.
In Sunday school class, I saw Tanya as one who was very quiet and peaceful. But there was a time that Greg had gone away, and while he was away, Tanya bought a house, and I couldn't believe it. I'm thinking, quiet little Tanya? Tanya, you are so strong, and I love you.
One thing I always remember about Tanya is of course her laugh, but even more than that, it's just how incredibly strong she was. She was by far one of the strongest people I know. It didn't matter what she was going through, but she always continued to stay positive and was uplifting to others.
Watching you through this journey has been an incredible experience for me to see how your strength and your faith in God has just been awesome. I just want to tell you that you have impacted a lot of people by going through this.
What I remember about Tanya is her beauty. And not just her outward beauty, although she always had the cutest shoes on those little feet in a very classy style, but her inner beauty. The way that she handled her cancer with such grace and was actually grateful for it. I remember after the first bout, she thanked God for it, for what she learned. That's true beauty, and I respect her very much for that.
I always remember about Tanya is her courage and her toughness. An awful lot of fight in that little lady. And she always never complained and always had a beautiful smile for you. We love you.
One thing about Tanya that I will always remember is that she had said to me that she will choose joy, even though that she knew she would have bad days ahead. And her strength and her faith in our sovereign Lord is undeniable.
One thing I'll remember about Tanya was how she sang in church and worshiped. She would always sing as if no one else was there, and you could tell that she was always present with God whenever she was singing.
One thing I will always remember about Tanya was the way that she raised her hand in praise despite her circumstances, trusting that God would continue to do what He said He would do and be who He said He was. Thank you for that example, Tanya.
One thing I'll remember about Tanya is just the way she worshiped God through the hard times. And as she was sitting up front in church, she would have her hand raised, and it was just such a testament to her faith and an encouragement to others.